G'day everyone, welcome to another video by myself, Andrew DFT. And of course today we've got the tutorial for the Clone Wars Captain Rex blaster pistol. Now of course I've already done tutorials for the larger clone DC-15 standard blaster from Clone Wars, so if you want to build this as well you can get that via the thumbnail at the end of this video. But for now, this here, a very simple and easy to make EVA foam prop. Now of course it looks a bit basic in the current state it is, that's just its raw form, but of course when you paint it up, it kind of completes and hides away the materials and you get a very nice prop to look at. Now of course to do the tutorial you're going to need templates. You can of course obtain those for free via the link in the description box below. Download that PDF, print off the templates and get started on the video right now. Alright, so go ahead and print off the template. It's only going to be on one sheet, so that's fancy. And then go ahead and cut out the main bulk of the gun. You can leave aside all the extra bits, of course we're not going to need them. Well, we're not going to need them yet. What you're first going to do is go ahead and cut these into two segments. We're then going to transfer this onto the foam. We're going to use 3 thicknesses of foam for the main core, and we'll use 2 for the handle. So go ahead and transfer the 3 on, being sure to flip one of the sides, so you should have 2 of one and 1 of the other. And then go ahead and transfer the template of the handle onto the foam, as well as flipping it so you have a left and a right. Now you can go ahead and glue in all the main core segments, being sure to keep them somewhat flat and seamless. But of course you will naturally have some overhang, but that's fine. What you can go and do is make sure you obviously indicate where they are, and then go ahead with a nice sharp craft blade and trim off those segments, making it more flush and kind of straight than it was before. Whether it's 100% perfect, it doesn't really matter. You can go ahead and actually finish that off in post-production, so to speak. But then go ahead and do the exact same to the handle, so that way we should have these 2 pieces all glued together and ready to piece. Now before we actually glue them together, we're going to go ahead and quickly add the beveled edges for the handle to make it a lot more easier to hold and a bit more, well, correct. We don't really want it in this very blocky 90-degree angled shape. So go in, we'll add the bevel line and then the depth line about halfway through one of the layers, and then go ahead and cut it off with a nice sharp craft blade, leaving these lovely lines, which gives it a bit more of a 3D appearance. Now to ensure that we glue these into the correct position, you can use the template as a negative space to transfer in using a few marks where this should actually sit. Then simply apply some glue and glue it into position, being sure to leave it until it cures and is nice and sturdy before progressing. So the first key point of detail will be this section here, the bottom part, which correlates to a long landscape line. What you can do is you can take that paper template and actually transfer 2 of them, of course a left and a right, and because they're relatively thick, we'll actually go ahead and add a depth line halfway through one of these layers, or both of these layers so to speak, and go ahead and actually carve them in half, making it a far thinner piece, so that way it doesn't stick out all that much and just creates a nice simple piece of detail. You can then use the paper as a negative transfer to find exactly where this line is going to sit, and then simply use some hot glue or contact cement, whatever you prefer, and glue it into position. Once that's in, we can start to work our way up the gun and do some more detail. So we'll start to tackle these 3 diagonal kind of little pieces of detail. The way you're going to do it is use the template to cut out a section with 3 of them all joined together, and then once you've got that main section cut out like this, you can then lay it onto the foam and trace out where it actually sits in relative to the piece we just did. Then what you're going to do is make a depth line all the way around, just a bit thinner than that line we've just drawn, which means this should sit just below that long horizontal piece of foam we just added before. Giving it 2 different heights just adds a bit more detail and creates a bit of a better 3D appearance. Once you've of course cut all those 3 into the individual segments, you can then use the negative transfer to find where these should actually sit in relative to itself, and then go ahead and glue them in with whatever adhesive you have. And they should sit there relatively nice like that. Be sure to make them sit on the same line because you don't want them all disjointed, it would look rather strange. Now for the next segment, we'll of course do this part that sits just right of those diagonal pieces we just completed. To do this, we're actually going to use some thinner 3mm foam, or whichever thin foam you can get access to. You're simply going to use the template as a negative transfer to apply these lines on, and then of course flip it so you have a left and a right. And what you'll just simply do is use the template to mark out where this should sit and go ahead and glue it in. Of course already we've got some very lovely layers happening, and it's definitely showing at different heights, which is a good bonus towards a better design. Next, what you're going to do is go ahead and cut out a long strip of foam about 1/4 of an inch thick. The reason we're going to do this is it's going to actually allow us to do some bottom detail which kind of exists on the original design. But of course we don't want the textured side happening or showing, so go ahead and trim that off, leaving it a bit thinner. Then what you're going to do is simply apply some glue at one end, and you're going to attach it here just where the long horizontal line we initially did first sits, and then go ahead and glue it down. This should actually cover the middle section seam, so that way it gives it a bit of a look, but it should wrap around perfectly like that and just add some nicer detail to the bottom under section of the gun. Once you have that glued in, we'll start to add the final pieces of detail that sit around this. We'll start with the top. Simply cut out a EVA foam thickness about half an inch thick, and the same length as the template. You can then go ahead and trim off the textured side with a depth line about 3/4 of the way through the foam towards the textured side. Once that's been cut clean, you can simply go ahead, apply some glue, and stick it in down the back there. It should sit maybe an inch from the back, so that way it's not sitting perfectly aligned. What you can then do is we can start to work on some of the trigger sections. So go ahead and grab this template and transfer that onto the foam. We will actually only use one thickness of foam. We don't really want to make it too thick. So to allow it to be stuck in properly, we'll go ahead and get rid of the textured side by adding that depth line about 90% of the way through this foam, and then simply trimming it off. So that way we've got two very clean sides. Now to finish it off, we'll add these small little circles that sit as a piece of detail at the back. I'm not too sure what they are, maybe they're little clips, I'm not sure, but all you need to do is grab the main circle and then cut it out and transfer it onto the foam, and then cut the interior perimeter line out and make a smaller section of foam. Now of course we want to get rid of these textured parts on them, so we'll go ahead and add some depth lines where necessary and go ahead and trim those parts off. Once of course those have all been cut clean of the textured, you can simply glue them to one another and then stick them on the back. They should just fit in there perfectly and give a nice cool looking 3D little appearance going on, but it's very traditional to the original design, so you haven't got any issues there. And then what we're going to do is add a barrel. You can either use a PVC pipe, a wooden dowel, or a cardboard tube. I've gone with a cardboard tube as I had it on hand, and it was the perfect size. Simply cut off a tiny bit of the original long piece that goes on the under section of the gun to allow the barrel to fit in nicely there in that section, and go ahead and apply some adhesive to put it in there. And well, it's looking pretty sweet, but just to finish it off, go ahead, apply some heat using a heat gun to really seal in the foam, condense it, and make all those beveled edges we applied before, which are properly jagged, lovely and smooth. So that's it. Hopefully you guys managed to follow along and it was relatively easy for you to see where we're going. Remember, this is only for one. Of course, if you want two, just replicate the process and you should have one in no time. I went with just a very simple black paint and some white edging just to give it a bit of war-torn effect, but you can do whatever you want, whether you want it factory new or Clone Wars torn like me, is up to you and how you wish to finalize your prop. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. Of course, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. It lets me know you enjoyed this content. And if you haven't subscribed yet, maybe you should consider doing so. Got a lot more cool content on the way. Otherwise, until the next time, catch you later.